Overeaters Anonymous is a fellowship of individuals who, through shared experience, strength, and hope, are recovering from compulsive eating. We welcome everybody who wants to stop eating compulsively. There are no dues or fees for members. We are self supporting through our own contributions, neither soliciting nor accepting outside donations. OA is not affiliated with any public or private organisation, political movement, ideology, or religious doctrine. We take no position on outside issues. Our primary purpose is to abstain from compulsive eating and compulsive food behaviours and to carry the message of recovery through the 12 steps of OA to all who still suffer. How our meeting works. At this meeting, we follow a rotating format. On the second week of the month is a recovered OA speaker who will be speaking on a topic of their choosing for 30 minutes. There will be a follow-up Q&A segment for 15 minutes where fellows are welcome to ask any questions of our speaker which are related to the topic in question. So I'm going to say the disclaimer. This meeting is recorded by audio only. You will see a recording sign at the top of your screen. The Q&A section of our meeting will also be recorded, but please note the chat function. Please only post your question in the chat function in the chat box, and then I will read them out. You could send the question to me or our host, or our security person, Claire. Yeah, and that's so that we're cooperating with the UK's data protection laws. Seventh tradition. Before we share, it's time for our seventh tradition. Although we meet electronically, we still have Zoom meeting costs to pay. And we also give contribution to OA UK EB, which is our virtual intergroup. Please make a contribution using the PayPal or bank details that will be entered in the chat. Newcomers, we ask that you wait to contribute until you are sure you want to be here. Okay. Bear with me one moment. Today is a speaker meeting, and we are honoured to have Mark D with us. Thank you so much. And the topic that Mark has chosen for today is I don't have a topic, but you can tell us all about it. Thank you so much, Mark, for being with us.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. And, thanks for the introduction and, thanks for being asked to be here. And my name is Mark, and I'm a gratefully recovered compulsive overeater. Well, what does that mean? I'll explain that in a bit. And also, the topic is kind of about spirituality, because when I was in a treatment center, I arrived in there, I was in horrendous shape. And, this whole God thing or spirituality or a higher power of your own understanding, no, I can't do that. Go away. And, I more or less, I wanted to turn on my heels and walk out. And, it turns out that six of them 12 steps either, directly or indirectly mention, a higher power or God or that kind of thing. And for me, it's really, really important, the spiritual angle of this. It's not a religious program. If people have a faith of their upbringing or that they've chosen later in life, whatever, that's absolutely fine. And I'm not here to try and convert anybody. And again, that's well, again, the fact that that this is a spiritual program, because I have a spiritual illness. And I am going to mention parts in the big book, and but just to kind of give you a bit of background, as the youngest of four boys, growing up in Dublin's inner city in the early 80s, early and mid 80s. And I grew up in a very loving home. There was no addiction, no nothing. Two very, very religious parents, but both very spiritual as well. So, you know what I mean? Like, this was not what I saw at home. But what was just outside the door, I grew up in an area where there was a huge amount of poverty, a huge amount of drug addiction, a huge amount of alcoholism. And it was crazy. Like the area at times was known as Beirut. It was absolutely mad. And like in primary school, that's kind of up to about the age of 12. There was 18 of us in school and 16 are dead, most because of drug addiction. And that, you know what I mean? So that is what you're kind of dealing with. And again, I came in here with all these preconceived, ideas. And this is the reason why I turned my back on that, God that was in my family home. And, we were, my family, I'd be brought over to, church services and all of that sort of stuff. But when I was 6, I had an accident and a very, very serious accident. And it kind of, I fractured my skull. I was a long time in intensive care. I was a long time then in hospital, and I was extremely lucky to survive. And, again, I got out of hospital. It was on Christmas Eve. It was my mother's birthday. And it was like the prodigal son walking back in. But being this weird, awkward kid, I hated the attention. And, on one hand, craving the attention, and on the other hand, hated the attention. So work that one out if you can. Then, about a year later, my mother got, really, really sick. And because I was the youngest of four boys, um, I was the last one to find out. And that's still a very big character defect of mine. If I'm the last one to find out something, it drives me bananas. And it's still a character defect to this day. And, my mother, she got very, very ill. She had to have, one of her lungs removed, and she was a long time in hospital, a lot of time, in recovery from that. And, because of the family structure, I was the one who had to learn how to cook and feed my older brothers and my father. And so basically, there was a lot of extra stuff, basically all the cheap stuff, that would go into the pot. And it didn't make it to my brother's plates or to my father's plates. It made it into me. And, and that's where, I started gaining weight at an alarming rate. And my dad was getting very, very concerned about this. But, he's very concerned about his wife who was in hospital and was really not well. But so at that point in my life, because my mother got sick and she's this God-fearing person, blah blah blah, because I had this accident which kind of changed my life quite significantly as well. That God thing, that higher power thing that my parents were, devoted to, I kind of went, no, no, you can sling your hook. I know my way. This is what I'm going to do. And again, when I arrived into that treatment center, I arrived in there because of the beverage program. And but doing the intake assessment, I was able to talk all about my drinking. I knew I had an eating disorder, but I wouldn't tell them about it. They can have the alcohol, but they can't have the food. And, and again, it was only when I was in that treatment center that it was the other people in the treatment center actually ratted me out to the counselors. But my addiction was always hiding in plain sight because it doesn't really matter. Mark's there. Again, I was this. I had a huge amount of pride. I was a really, really high achiever in school. Anything I turned my hand to, I was very, very good at. So people went, "Oh, look, Mark is normal. Mark is fine. He just is a bit overweight." And to progress on through life, I later on, again, I didn't have to work too hard in school, and then progressed on and I was working. And but like before going into college, I kind of realized, so up until 18 years of age, I was just overeating, overeating, overeating. And, it eventually left me somewhere in and around 19 and a half to 20 stone in weight. And before going into college at kind of 18 years of age, I kind of decided that, hey, when I'm in college, I want to have fun. I want to be with girls. I want to do all of that sort of stuff. I want that, perceived amazing college experience. And so I started going out with my friend and we'd go down to the park and we'd be, exercising and doing whatever. And the weight start dropping off me. This is magic, and my parents were delighted and absolutely wonderful. Then that stopped working, and I was still left, not at my ideal weight. Not that there's an ideal weight, because once that I hit what I think the ideal weight is, I want to go lower, and then the benchmark goes lower. Then, I kind of realized, hey, if I stop eating, the weight will start coming off again. That's what I started doing. And the weight started coming off. And then my parents smelled a rat. They went, hang on a minute, he's not eating. So I started eating again, but then I started making myself sick. So I was, flirting between not eating, bulimia, binging, purging, all of that. So kind of a little bit of, all of the various different aspects of kind of, an overeater's, life. And later on, there I am, and I'm working away, and I've met uh, my girlfriend, and now my wife. And she had no idea about, she comes from a family of non-drinkers. She didn't realize that I was completely off the rails. She didn't realize about the food because it was just all lies, deceit, or whatever else. And, she still, to this day has, the email that she sent to a local undertaker to see how much it would cost to bury me because I'd actually gone so thin. And I was in very, very poor shape, and I was having epileptic seizures about once a month, and I was very badly injuring myself, and I had them seizures. And I still could felt nothing was wrong here. What's it? There's nothing to see here. I have my alcohol, I have my food. But when I did that intake assessment in the treatment center, they can have the alcohol, but not the food. And so when just before ringing that treatment center, there's that bit in the big book where it talks about, loneliness and despair, quicksand stretched in all directions. I had met my match. Food was my match. I could not stop either binging, purging, overeating, all the crazy ass food behaviors. And there is that bit in the big book where it says, how dark before the dawn, before being catapulted into the fourth dimension. And I remember being in that treatment center, and I remember I wouldn't let the counselors into my head, but I was forced to go to AA and I was forced to go to OA. I again, this is, the higher power in action. The person who's now my sponsor and is still my sponsor to this day was sitting in that first meeting. And it was about 9 months later, I asked them to be my sponsor. And they said to me, Mark, I've been sponsoring you since the start of this. And they were bringing me for coffees. They were looking after me. They were giving me words of advice. They were helping me and just nudging me in the right direction. And, and again, what I saw in my sponsor was that part. I mean, we were just talking about it before the meeting about Ebby, Ebby, fresh skin, and that, that he could come to pass on his experience, strength, and hope to Bill. And, again, it was Ebby that got across that kind of concept of a higher power of your own understanding. That never mind the God thing, it's a higher power of your own understanding. And again, that came to me because of, going to lots of meetings, because of listening to various different people, because I had that disease of now, the disease of never enough. I couldn't stop. And I mean, not only with food, but with my behaviors, with my thinking, with my action. And like, I wasn't only a binge thinker, I wasn't only a binge eater, I was a binge thinker. I'd sit there for hours on end trying to think of every single scenario. But and it is that thing. I have an emotional illness that has a solution, but every time something is wrong, it is always my emotions and my feelings that are kicking off every single time. And it's always the emotions and the feelings. And that was the bit that I couldn't, that was the bit that I couldn't understand. And a bit that really strikes me anytime it's read at a meeting that I'm at, it's on page 45 of the big book. It doesn't talk about alcohol, it doesn't talk about food, it doesn't talk about addiction. On page 45, it says, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously, but where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main objective is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problems. And like, for Bill and Bob and the other people who wrote the big book, for them to be saying, this book is about you finding a higher power. Yeah, and that whole thing that Ebby passed on to Bill about it's a higher power of your own understanding, because a lot of people, or certainly a lot of people that I've talked to, they turned their back on the religion that was maybe in their family home, that the religious schooling that they maybe got. And and like I was a placard carrying atheist or agnostic when I came in. I didn't know which, but I just knew this higher power or God was going to have no place in my life. But again, it was through listening to people that I realized, hey, look, I'm an analyst. That's my job. And I was analyzing people in meetings. And the thing that I realized was anybody who seemed to have that life beyond their wildest dreams, anybody who kind of had, that thing that I was looking for, anybody seemed to have a good family life, went to plenty of meetings, had a sponsor, and had worked the steps. And that's the bit that I started going, oh, hang on a minute, there's something about that person. They just seem to have this inner calm that I had absolutely zero understanding of. And, like, and again, that higher power thing, Bill, I believe later on spoke about that the the higher power thing. It's not this flash of light on the road to Damascus type moment where all of a sudden you don't have God in your life and boom, God's in your life and that's it. Everything has changed. And that's where he wrote the appendix on page 567 of the big book, and it's called Spiritual Experience. So the terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism or food in our case has manifested itself amongst us in many different forms. Yet
Mark,
it is
just
true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. And Bill didn't often admit that he was wrong. And in the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed by at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Amongst our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experience are that the psychologist William James called the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he or she is himself has finally realized that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. Um, that let's say that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspecting inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think that most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our most religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honesty, facing his problems in the light of our experience, can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need be have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. And I found that me getting a higher power in my life was that educational variety. It wasn't just all of a sudden. I was getting very, very curious. I was starting to go, hey, anybody who seems to have it together, anybody who seems to have that life beyond your wildest dreams, they seem to have a higher power. They seem to have done the steps. They seem to have a sponsor. And so my analytical brain was saying, well, okay, what do I need? So I need a sponsor and I need to do the steps. So I asked that person who'd been extremely kind to me, and I remember, they said, leave it with me for 24 hours. Good God, it may as well have been 24 years, because my mind was racing and all that overthinking and all of the craziness. And they rang me back the following day, exactly at the time that they were meant to ring me. And they said that they, talked to their sponsor, and their sponsor suggested that they should take me on. And and my sponsor said, as long as you're ruthlessly honest with me, as long as you're willing to go to any lengths to get this, I'll do anything to help you. And I agreed to that. I agreed to that without hesitation. And me and my sponsor have this amazing relationship. My sponsor will pluck the eye out of my head if they think that I am, going off the rails, if they think that I'm maybe not being honest or whatever. But thankfully, that hasn't happened in quite some time. And, like, my sponsor was there for me when my mother passed away, when my father passed away. And, my parents got to meet my sponsor as well. And, and again, like, my sponsor has been through many, many hardships themselves. And again, has always been able to get through them. And like some of the hardships were absolutely horrendous, but I'm not here to do, a chair for them. But, like, I find that, having the fellowship of OA, making them outreach calls, talking to people, doing 10-step calls, absolutely incredible. And like the program, to boil the 12 steps down into a bit of a nutshell, is all that, trust God, clean house, and help others. And I keep it pretty simple about, red foods and green foods. There's no amber gambler stuff. It's like it's either red or it's green. No, no messing about because I know what are my amber foods. And with that brings neutrality. And that thing where, I can walk into any, supermarket up and down the land. I can look at any particular foods that are on my red list, and I may as well be looking at breeze blocks. It doesn't matter. It no longer sucks me in and no longer brings me there. And I said at the start that I was going to talk about that, I'm a recovered compulsive overeater because I had an argument with my sponsor about this, saying, oh, God, what are these people talking about recovered and all of that sort of stuff? And again, my sponsor pointed me to a section in the big book where it says, you know, once that we've done the program and contingent on, on doing this on a daily basis, we remain recovered. And, and that's what I love and that's where the concept of this being just 24 hours became super important to me because no matter, my sponsor very, very frequently, says to me about, that we don't get clean on yesterday's shower. I need to be doing, it's kind of that wash, rinse, repeat. Go in, do what I did yesterday, and yesterday was a good day. So it kind of stands to reason that tomorrow should be a good day. And I remember when my father passed away, or the plane I was on was landing in Prague, and when we're in the taxi on the way into Prague, my wife got the call, and I turned to my wife and I said, "I need to get to a church and I need to get to a meeting." And my wife said, "Yeah, that's no problem at all." If you had told me that that'd be my reaction, whatever, 9.5 years ago when I came, just before I came into recovery, I absolutely would have laughed at you. I would have said that you were this religious nut or whatever. But, and again, my wife did not trust me in any way, shape, or form. And the bond that we have now is just incredible. And I can tell her absolutely anything. But, you know, step one for me is that admission and acceptance that, I'm a compulsive overeater. Step three is, handed our will and our lives over to a higher power. And that has to be on a daily basis because I'm sometimes driving down the road on the way into work and I decide God needs to look after some wars around the world. He doesn't need to look after me. And I take back my will. But generally, that day doesn't go so well, and my 10th step will pick that up. Step 4 and 5, hold nothing back. There's nothing your sponsor probably already hasn't heard. Just hold absolutely nothing back. But what I found when I did step one, I had this kind of very intellectual acceptance that I was a compulsive overeater. But when I got to the end of the steps, I had a spiritual acceptance that I was a compulsive overeater. And that's a complete game changer. That's a complete different, in my mind that I had been reorganized, as it kind of says in the big book. I do have peace and serenity like I never had as a child growing up. The other things that, keep me on the straight and narrow is, I have a sponsor. As I said, I've had the same sponsor right the way through. I have
Welcome,
sponsees.
Mark.
I love working with sponsees. I learn more from them than they learn from me. I do my 10th step. I journal, I pray, I meditate, and most of all, I like having fun because I was a miserable, but I know I'm being recorded, so I won't use the expletive. But I was a miserable, and insert your expletive. But I love recovery and I love what it has done for me. I love what it's done for my family, and I'm sure my work colleagues love what it's done for me because I'm less of a lunatic in work than I used to be. But look, I'll leave it there. And thanks so much for asking me. And I hope that made sense to people. And I hope I didn't offend anybody.
My goodness, thank you so much, Mark, for sharing with us. That was beautiful. Yeah, I think everybody can raise a hand to applaud you there. Thank you so much, Mark. Beautiful. Okay. Um, so yeah, it's now question time, Q&A time. And please feel free to pop your question that you have for Mark in the chat to me directly or to one of our hosts. And yeah, and I will ask it. Okay. So thanks, Mark, for a wonderful share. Please, can you share how you are able to keep your recovery fresh and keep your program
Yeah.
fresh?
And again, that's the bit that I was always mystified by. You'd hear people sharing that they were 5, 10, 15 years and more, abstinent. And the thing that helps me keep it fresh is to actually live in the day. I permanently used to live in the future. I would be future tripping all the time. And I got a great piece of advice at the start about all the madness, all the junk going on in your head about, oh, this is going to happen in the future. I'm going to lose this job or I'm going to do whatever. Write it out. Have a look back on it a few weeks later. You'll find that 95, 98, 99%, maybe even 100% of it hasn't come true. So for me, learning how to keep it in the day and just having that thing of doing the same things day in, day out, starting your day with reading upon awakening, saying the third step prayer and doing a bit of, prayer and meditation and just trying best as possible, handing it over. And that's the thing that keeps it fresh for me each day because I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mark. Um, can I ask you, how do you sponsor?
Yeah, again, I generally tend to do that sponsee by sponsee, because sponsees can be very, very different. Because, like with my sponsor, we went through the 12 steps in 12 weeks, and I was told this is going to be hard work. And I had no problem with that. Sometimes you'd have a sponsee who's maybe working 12-hour shifts or maybe has a number of children, And so, I have learned over the years to not be so rigid about, oh, that we have to do it in X period of time. And some people have a lot more baggage than other people, and it can be very difficult going through some of them crucial steps, like steps 4 and 5. So, I find it does kind of vary sponsee by sponsee, but I generally, I always say to them what my sponsor asked me, which was, as long as you're prepared to be ruthlessly honest with me, then, I can do anything to try and help you. And so that's the way I sponsor.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Um, could you share with us how you stay connected to your higher power through the day? You spoke earlier a little bit about your morning meditation. How about the
Yeah.
through the day?
Oh, the Serenity Prayer is absolutely great. I remember before a job interview, I was so nervous I couldn't even remember the Serenity Prayer. I probably said it 5,000 times or more at that stage. But I remember that there was a guy that I was helping, and he's struggling with the higher power thing. And he received an amazing piece of advice, and it stayed with me to this day. And he was an electrician, and he has amazing recovery now. And he really, the higher power thing was a really huge thing for him. And a counselor, said to him, "Hey, you're an electrician. If you want an appliance to work, you have to plug it in. If you want your head to work, you need to plug in to that higher power 5 times a day, and you probably won't go too far wrong." So, if it is just like an analogy like that about plugging in multiple times during the day, then they're the kinds of things that help me because, in the early days, I know I had to set up reminders on my phone to sort of go, "Hey, hang on a minute, how long have you gone?" Again, I had to have diary items in my phone to remind me to eat because I used to go in very long periods without eating at all. And so I also had, okay, before I eat, I would say the serenity prayer. After I eat, the kind of, top and tail, the meal, I would also say the serenity prayer. So, kind of, I feel that that's a great way of starting and stopping a meal, as well as a way of connecting in with your higher power.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. Keep the questions coming through, guys. You spoke earlier about a little bit how you sponsor. How do you work with people who are in relapse or relapsing?
Yeah. Again, I'll always remember one of the earliest fancies I had, God loving me, had a slip. And I kind of went, "Oh God, what do I do here?" So I rang my sponsor, and my sponsor said, "Look, it's always step one. It's always step one. It is always that thing of not being able to admit, not being able to accept that you're, a compulsive overeater." And normally, that I sit down, have a chat about, "Hey, look, where are we with that?" And like sometimes even go back to doing basically step zero. And like step zero is that thing about that of just not being able to accept the defiance. Like step zero is that defiance and not being able to acknowledge that you actually are a compulsive overeater. And again, sometimes it is that thing of, okay, write out, all the good reasons why you should eat and write out all the bad reasons why you should eat. The good reasons, you might have one, you might have two. The bad reasons should be quite an extensive long list. So I find when somebody sees it in black and white, it's kind of it becomes a little bit of a they can't really argue with you. And again, it's about just having that, conversation with them that if somebody does relapse, "Hey, look, I would prefer for you to ring me and for us to sit down and have a conversation rather than for you to go back out there for years and not come back." So, again, it's to try and have that love and tolerance towards people who've relapsed as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks. Um, Thank you so much for a fantastic share, Mark. Could you tell us a bit more about your focus on having fun? What does that look like in your recovery today?
Yeah, myself and my wife, we every evening, we sit down and we actually talk to each other about how our days have been, not about recovery, not about whatever, and it's helped our relationship as well. I like to do a bit of running. I love being in nature, and nature for me is also connecting to my higher power. Like my higher power doesn't live in a specific building or a specific location, that the higher power is, or God, the great outdoors. I love, being outdoors, experiencing nature. I love to travel. I absolutely adore traveling. As recently in the Arctic Circle on the 24th of June, where it doesn't get dark. And it was weird. It was weird beyond all comprehension. Like 3 a.m., it was as bright as it is now. It was just bizarre. So, I have traveled all over the world. And last year we did a cruise in Alaska, And God, this is like a travel show. But I did a cruise in Alaska, and on cruise ships, they actually have fellowship meetings. So I was sitting there with a lady from Hawaii, a man from Chicago, and I think there was three other Irish people as well. Everybody was talking about the same issues or problems or whatever. So it doesn't really matter, whether, you're from, Australia, Canada, wherever you're from, our heads tend to be very, very similar.
Oh, thanks a million. I didn't know that about the cruises. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you, Mark. You mentioned the defect of character of not liking to hear about things last, and that not being removed, and that is not fully removed yet. Has your experience been, what has your experience been of your defects of character, being removed by a higher power? Any advice when certain traits and attitudes remain? Thank you.
Yeah, and again, it was the second time I went through the steps. And I said to my wife, it was during COVID, so I wasn't able to physically meet my sponsor. I said to my wife, oh, look, we're going through the steps again. And I was doing step 4 and 5. And I said, oh, look, I'll be probably 2 hours, maybe three. And oh, whatever it was, I think it was about 9 hours later when I came off that call. And I kind of flippantly mentioned a particular guy in work, and basically I hated him. And then I was moving on to the next thing. My sponsor went beep, 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 back up the bus. And, and we talked about it. And through digging through it, it was like I had this massive character defect, which was fear of conflict. I would do anything to avoid conflict. So my sponsor challenged me. You have to get yourself into some situations where there's conflict. Now, even explain to your wife that you want to have a bit of an argument. Nothing too great, like, look, we don't want a divorce at the end of this or anything like that. And like it turns out the next day when I was in work, I ended up on this really important, huge, big meeting with the CEO of the company, and I was having to disagree with him. And by God, was I quaking on that. But that taught me that that defect of character about kind of being afraid of confrontation, that can be overcome. Also, people pleasing. I would do anything to please anybody, bar myself. I will exhaust myself. I'll absolutely be at death's door with, with chronic fatigue, chronic tiredness. Yet, and so basically, I don't have anything left in the cup to drink from. I'm absolutely gone. And so again, I heard on a meeting a wonderful recovered fellow who was my 10 step partner a few weeks back. She said to me about if you're going to say yes to something, have a think about what are you going to have to say no to. So rather than just immediately saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do that for you," to sort of go, "Okay, well, hang on a minute. I had a meal planned with my family this evening. I'm going to say no to my family to do this work commitment or whatever it might be." But that it's funny that that specific character defect of being the last one to know, that I find that when I do dig into it after doing my 10th step, that again, there's normally something bubbling under the surface. And a big one for me is tiredness. So for me, it's always to be maintaining that thing about HALT, HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And if you're any one of the four of them, you're getting off kilter. If you're two of the three of them, look, get to a meeting. If you're three of them, hey, you really need to see your sponsor. And if you're four of them, hey, look, you know what I mean? Take a lie down in the darkened room and then start contacting people. But and also one of the best things that I ever heard, it was a counselor, it was actually a doctor of eating disorders. Her name is Dr. Kilty Oberlin. Um, and she said that the one mantra that's really good for people with addiction, but especially for people with eating disorders, is I'm good enough today. And that just blew my mind when I heard it. The first time I heard it, it blew my mind. And so much so, I actually got it tattooed on my arm because my sponsor always tells me that I have built-in forgetters. So I got that tattooed onto my arm, and I can remind myself on a daily basis that I am good enough today. And all I have, it is just one day at a time. So it kind of falls nicely into that as well.
Oh, great stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Mark. Have you any experience of working with others who don't seem to be able to be honest with you? If so, what do you do?
Yeah. And again, that's where, to be sitting down and, to be talking to the people, to be talking to the person. And, it is that thing of being able to just hold up in a mirror to them. Well, hang on a minute, you told me this. Yet a week later, you told me, no, you're actually there. That doesn't make any sense. And it's not to try and purposely catch somebody out in a lie, but the more often that you sit down and you talk to somebody, because again, a wonderful phrase that I heard in a meeting was there's only one version of the truth, and that's the truth. No matter how upsetting it is or whatever the case may be. So if I tell you the truth, let's just say I've crashed a car, I've written it off, and there's tens of thousands of pounds worth of damage. If I tell you that, I don't actually have to remember that because that's the truth. And if you say, well, what's happened there? It was like, because I have told you the truth. I don't have to remember the lie. But once that you tell one lie, you have to tell another lie to cover for that lie. And then that just starts multiplying itself out. And you eventually end up being caught in this, ball of lies, and the deck of cards just falls down pretty quickly.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks a million. Um, can you share more around your steps 5 to 9 process? Did you encounter any challenges with making any amends?
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. There's a funny story about I have three older brothers. Two of them need to be in the beverage program, the same as myself. They're unfortunately not. And the thing is, I had made up my list, and I kind of said, okay, right, I need to talk to the two of them to clear my side of the street for the things I'd done. They had done things to me, and but I couldn't go there, and I that's not the intention of the steps. And I was offering to meet them in pubs. I was offering to do whatever to get together to make my amends. And my sponsor said to me, "Look, Mark, you just have to stop. Let them come to you. It may never happen, but as long as you're willing to make amends to them, that's enough. But be willing that if it ever does present itself, that you're ready." And lo and behold, the next weekend, I was in the National Concert Hall in Dublin with my father, and both of them brothers walked in. And I did not know they were going to be there. And I said to my dad, who I'd already made my amends to, I said, Dad, I have to go and talk to the two of these. And I took both of them off, one each separately or whatever else, and I made my amends. There was also somebody I forgot on my step eight, and I had not purposely, forgotten them. It was just genuinely I had forgotten, and it was my cousin. And it was the first meeting I went to after I left treatment. I went to an AA meeting. I'm sitting up the front in a tiny room. It's the size of a bathroom. And the person doing the chair was my cousin. I did not know what to do. So as soon as the meeting ended, I probably would have won the 100-meter sprint for how quickly I got out of there. But through when I'm going through the steps or whatever, I had completely forgotten about that incident. Absolutely forgotten about it. And when my mother was sick, there I am up with my mother. It was a Sunday, and herself and her husband, who I know are both in recovery, walked in. And I went, oh God, oh God, oh, it just straight away it hit me. And I said, I have to make amends to her. I can't write anything out. I can't ring my sponsor. This is not quite a once in a lifetime opportunity, but here it is. It's presented itself, and I was willing. And after a while, they got up to leave, and I said to my mother, "Oh, ma, I have to go and use the bathroom." And I went after her, and I explained the situation, and she just said, "I don't know, I don't even remember at all." But at least I was able to clear my side of the street for me. I didn't know if I'd upset her, I didn't know if whatever, but at least, so if you have forgotten somebody and it is absolutely by accident, that's okay. But if there is stuff that you're leaving out because you don't want to give that away or you don't want to make amends, then again, that's just you're going to get caught up in that lie and it will catch you out eventually.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And one more question to close us out, maybe. Thank you for your share, Mark. What advice do you have for newcomers to OA? What do you wish you knew at the beginning of your recovery journey?
Yeah. And again, it is about keep on coming back because, and I know you hear at loads of meetings and you're nearly sick of people saying it. But, again, there was a lady in my OA home group and she had years of experience. And anytime there was a newcomer, she would always share the same thing. And I said, oh, that stupid woman, will she ever stop sharing this? And she was absolutely right, of course. And she said, hey, look, don't come in here, have your first meeting. You're wondering whether this is a religious cult. You're wondering what this is all about. You're maybe still going through a bit of detox from the food, from the sugar, from whatever it might be. Come to 6 meetings, have a listen. Don't judge us too harshly. And if you think you're in the right place, then just keep on coming back. But come to 6 meetings, give it a shot. And so I was lucky that I did that. Then I kind of went, okay, there's something in this. And then I kept on coming back. And OA got me rather than me getting OA. And eventually it just kind of caught up on me that I realized there was people there who were very, very well, who had that life beyond their wildest dream. And it's, you know what I mean? It's not an edition of Bullseye where you win a speedboat and a foreign holiday and all that sort of stuff. It's being able to sleep at night. It's having that peace of mind and the serenity and, and just feeling nice and calm. And so to anybody who's a newcomer, I'm telling you, I was a disaster when I came in here. My mind was completely and utterly destroyed. And because of the very kind people of OA, people taking me under their wings. And again, that same lady, Dr. Kilty Oberlin, said the most important thing that we have is connection. Giving a newcomer your phone number and saying, "Hey, look, you can ring me anytime if you're worried. If you want to talk about anything, give me a ring." And again, sometimes making that first call is so difficult for the newcomer that sometimes it's maybe no harm to just give them a ring, say, "Hey, look, you were at the meeting last night, great that you're coming. You know what I mean? I'm going to a meeting tonight. Do you fancy coming along? Or here's the details or whatever." So just that fellowship because it was the fellowship that helped me so much at the start. Don't be too worried about the steps at the start or the traditions or anything like that. Keep on coming back. And eventually, you will hear somebody doing a chair, you'll hear somebody who's the speaker at a meeting, and they'll tell your story, or they'll tell a story very, very similar. And that terminal uniqueness goes away. I'm not the only one who thought like that. I'm not the only one who had that savage state of mind and couldn't hold my life together. And so, you know, for me, it's just keep on coming back and wait for the miracle to happen.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for your experience, strength, and hope. Yeah, just amazing for the newcomer and all of us to hear. So thank you, Mark. Q&A time has now come to a close. Thank you so much, Mark, for your service, time, and energy. We will now open the chat to share our numbers for outreach. For those who would like to, please share your name and number. Please also, any available abstinent sponsors, indicate if you're available to sponsor. I'll just do that. For any newcomers, we have a newcomers hub where where our newcomer greeters will be happy to have an informal chat with you and answer questions. To any newcomers who'd like to stay behind at the end of the meeting, please raise your electronic hand now, and then we'll pop you in the breakout room once we are finished. We have a WhatsApp group for fellowship. We've placed the link in the chat to the WhatsApp group, so please feel free to join that. I can see we've got hands up, which is great for the Newcomers Hub. So we will now close the meeting in the same way we always close a New Freedom Big Book study meeting, by reading the 12 promises of recovery as laid out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, bottom of page 83, starting with the paragraph, "If we are painstaking." Mark, could you please read it for us? Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. If we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we'll see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We'll suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. Our meeting recurs on a weekly basis. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday at the same time, 7:30 British Standard Time. May your higher power bless you and keep you until then.